Katie, just want to check in again. I think we have a quorum.
Yes, sir, we do. We can proceed and begin.
Okay, thank you. Okay, good morning, everybody. Hope you're doing well. Haven't seen, I guess, most of you for a little while, but again, hope you're doing well and enjoying the fall weather. Let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. So I, Chair Schmidt, will now call the Building Code Structures Board meeting of October 9th, 2024 to order. The time now is 9:33 a.m. Let's start with roll call, and if I could ask Katie, if you could please call the roll.
Yes. Lora Ratcliff here. She's here in person. Eric Schmidt, Chair.
Here.
Virtually. Andrew Dykeman, Vice Chair.
Present in person.
Thank you. Brenda Hartzog. Here. Virtually. Thank you, Brenda. Gary Heikkinen.
Here.
Thank you, Gary. He's virtual. Marshall McGrady.
I'm here.
Marshall, he's also virtual. Jean Root is absent. And Shayla Duke. Thought I saw her on here on phone, but maybe not. She said she would be here, so, but with or without, we do have quorum, sir.
Okay, thank you very much, Katie. Okay, next order of business is approval of the agenda and order of business. So let me ask board members if they have any changes to the agenda or the order of business. All right, seeing none, I, Chair Schmidt, will now rule the agenda and order of business approved. Next order of business is approval of the draft minutes of May 1st, 2024. Let me ask board members if they have any changes to the draft minutes. Okay, hearing none, I, Chair, will rule the draft minutes of May 1st, 2024 as final. Okay. Reminder of next meeting date. So as we look ahead, our next board meeting date is November 6th, 2024. All right. Next up, we do have a couple of new members that I want to welcome, and I'm sure the rest of us would like to welcome as well. And the first person, although I think it sounds like she might not be here, or here yet, is Shayla Duke. So Shayla was confirmed by the interim committee on rules and executive appointments on September 24th, 2024 to the Building Code Structures Board in the position representing Oregon Disabilities Commission. Her term began October 1st, 2024, serving a partial 4-year term ending June 30th, 2028. So let me just check one more time. Is Shayla with us? Because maybe she'd like to introduce herself to the board. And I don't see her, so maybe if she comes in late, we can do that. But again, I'm assuming I'm speaking on everybody at the board. We want to welcome Shayla to the Building Code Structures Board and looking forward to working with her going forward. All right. We also have another new member. So I want to welcome Lora Ratcliff. Lora was confirmed by the interim committee on rules and executive appointments on September 24th, 2024 to the Building Code Structures Board in the position representing the Fire Protection Agency. Her term began October 1st, 2024, serving in an unexpired 4-year term ending June 30th, 2027. So welcome, Lora, and I'd like to definitely offer you up some time to introduce yourself and board members the same. So Lora, please, let's start with you.
Lora Ratcliff. I've been with the Albany Fire Department for 13 years now. My first career started out as actually a building plans examiner with Marion County. That was my first degree. And then when the economy crashed in 2009, I lost my job and went into fire. Actually, one of my first cooperative work experiences with Schmidt was with McMinnville Fire and Eric McMullen, so I know him well. It's good to see him on this board. Hi, Eric.
Welcome, good to see you.
Me too. So I'm very excited for this opportunity to be a part of this board and offer what I can and glean from you all as well. So two-way street here.
That's great.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. Again, welcome, Laura. Welcome to the board. Just open it real quick. Board members, any other comments that you'd like to offer up at this point in time?
Just welcome.
All right. Okay.
Same there.
Thank you very much.
Welcome to the board.
Also, go ahead. Thank you, Marshall. Also, I do want to make sure and acknowledge and thank Chase Browning for his time on the Building Code Structures Board. So his term did begin on October 1st, 2023. Want to make sure we give thanks for his service and time on the board. Lora is replacing Chase Browning. So I don't think Chase is with us, but definitely again appreciate his time and contributions to the board. Okay. Next order of business is public comment. So I'm going to check in with Pierre Sabah, policy advisor, to see if there are any public comments that need to be addressed or opened up.
Thank you, Chair Schmidt, members of the board. For the record, my name is Pierre Sabah, policy analyst with the division. As of this morning, we did receive one request for public comment from Mr. Michael Andersen, who was the proponent of PPO2, which is under new business item A. It's the board's discretion if they would like Michael to speak now, or if they would just prefer he speaks as public comment during new business item A, which is completely up to the board. So it's up to you, Chair Schmidt and members of the board.
Okay. Thank you. My tendency would be to wait until we have the item, but let me open it up. Okay, I'm seeing a couple head nods from, okay. We will go ahead and hold off on that public comment until that agenda item is up.
That works great, Chair. Thank you. I'll hold the line open if there's anyone that wants to provide any general public comment right now.
Okay, thank you very much. Next is a structural program update. We've got Tony Rocco, our structural program chief, policy and technical services. I think a person of multiple hats. So Chief Rocco, if you're here, would love to get an update from you on structural program.
Great, thanks, Mr. Chairman. And good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, Tony Rocco with the division. I'm going to keep the report and the program update brief this morning. Really want to just use this time as another opportunity to thank the technical review committee that was appointed by this board to do the heavy lifting of the OSSC promulgation process. It was fantastic having all of the different committee members. The board did an exceptional job selecting those members. And the meetings were great. It was, it's always it's a rewarding process, to have all of the different perspectives, expertise. We had folks from the city of Portland. We had building officials from out east. We had representation from all across the industry. And I just wanted to again, take the opportunity to thank them for their participation. For volunteering and for all of their input and expertise. Beyond that, I just wanted to also note, that's the big thing on the agenda today, right? We only do this every 3 years about, and we're adopting the next iteration of the OSSC, the 25 iteration. I wanted to note a couple of dates. So the anticipated effective date of that code is October 1 of next year. So October 1 of 2025, and that's the effective date. What we anticipate is a 6-month grace period until it is mandatorily implemented statewide. So that would take us to April 1 of 26. Particularly on the commercial side or on the OSSC, the structural code side, that 6 months is very important. As you know, a lot of work goes into pre-construction development, 50% CD development, and so that 6 month really that period provides them with the opportunity to kind of plan out projects that they have down the road and get them under the appropriate code accordingly. So Just wanted to note that. And Mr. Chairman, thank you. Happy to answer any questions that you or the board members may have.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. Let me go ahead and turn it over to board members. Any questions for Mr. Rocco? I know we're going to spend some quality time with him in just a bit as he does his great work going through all the code summary. Okay, thank you very much. Let's go ahead and move forward for the next energy program update. So we have also Mark Heizer with us, Mechanical and Energy Systems Engineer for Building Codes Division. So Mark, if you wouldn't mind giving us a update as it relates to the energy program.
Thank you, Chair Schmidt. Members of the board, for the record, Mark Heizer with the division. I'll start off with an update about the partner code. The mechanical code process is also underway as well in the same position. The board will be reviewing the mechanical committee recommendations on October 22nd, sort of doing the same thing we're doing here today. And we would assume that the adoption dates will be in alignment with the structural codes. We're the same beginning date and same mandatory date for next year. Again, looking at energy code, an update on that for the 2024 Oregon Energy Efficiency Specialty Code. The beginning date will be, we're looking at it's going to be January 1st, 2025, for using ASHRAE standard 90.1 2022 as the baseline of the code. A lot of forums and other assistance pieces coming together for that. So the energy code update will be looking at starting January 1st of next year. The commercial reach code process, its adoption process is starting this month. So it will be what would be above and beyond the 2024 Oregon Energy Efficiency Specialty Code. That will be starting again with the upcoming seed meeting, working for public proposals and updates to the current version, looking for more alignment with incentives to make sure that the reach code can, point people toward funds to go above and beyond the base energy code. And I'll leave it at that because I know you have a lot to do here today. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mark, for that update. Any questions for Mr. Heizer? Go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, Mark, real quick. Probably should know this, but since 90.1 is under continuous maintenance, does the state automatically then adopt and approve addendums as they are published in between the updates on that code?
Thank you, Gary. Mark Heizer with Division. No. Amendments to 90.1 under continuous maintenance. We adopt the published book as of the date of, so we're adopting 90.1 2022 as published and as aligned with federal determination that's made by U.S. Department of Energy. So that is what we adopt. So then the next adoption process would be 90.1 2025 with all of the amendments and addenda that have happened between the 2022 publication date and later. So we do not adopt amendments or addenda to 90.1 until it's published in the book. So is that
right? Thanks. Yep, that answers my question. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. Okay, any additional questions for Mr. Heizer? Okay, thank you, Mark, very much for the update. All right, moving to the next order of business. Let's see, no communications or appeals or unfinished business. We're going to now move to new business. First up is a board review of a public code amendment proposal, PP-02. And so this will require a roll call vote and a motion. And so let me invite Pierre Sabah and also our structural program chief, Tony Rocco, to be able to introduce and discuss this item.
Thank you, Chair Schmidt, members of the board. Again, for the record, my name is Pierre Sabah, policy analyst with the division. The division is requesting the board to review the public code amendment proposal PP-02 which was unanimously disapproved by the 2025 Oregon Structural Specialty Code Technical Review Committee. Some background, House Bill 3395 was passed during the 2023 Oregon legislative session. Under this bill, Section 8 required division through the Building Code Structures Board to review and consider updates to the Oregon Structural Specialty Code established under ORS 455132 to allow residential occupancy to be served by a single exit consistent with the appropriate policies of the state. The relevant portions of the bill can be found today in your board packet memo. So at the 2025 Oregon Structural Specialty Code Committee meetings, Public Code Amendment Proposal 02 or PPO2 was proposed by proponent Michael Andersen during the proposal period for this code. This proposal was centered around no more than 20 dwellings per stairwell to be served with a single exit. The Public Code Amendment proposal would expand the current statewide code allowance from 3 stories above grade plane, with 4 dwelling units maximum per story being served by a single exit. The committee reviewed and discussed this proposal during their meetings. All committee members who were present during this discussion unanimously voted to disapprove this public amendment proposal after a lengthy discussion and engagement from the proponent. The two committee members who were not present during this discussion abstained from this vote. So today we will discuss this. Tony's here for any technical questions. We'll also allow proponent Michael Andersen, who is here to provide his public comment at this time. And after discussion, there will be a motion. Motion can get a little complicated. I can help the board with that, but when we get there, we can discuss. Thank you, Chair Schmidt.
Thank you. Thank you, Pierre. So Mr. Andersen, please, if you I guess let me ask a point of clarification. So for Building Codes Division staff, do we have any, I just want to make sure, do we have a time limit on public comment? What is it? How does this typically work? Do you have anything on that?
Thank you, Chair Schmidt. For the record, Pierre, it's about the division. Generally, it's about 5 minutes for public comment, but it's at your discretion and the board's discretion if they would like to let Michael speak longer on this specific item. So really, at the end of the day, it's up to you. So.
Okay.
I don't think I'll need more than 3 at the most.
No, that's great. And I think, I was going to say, Michael, we got 5. Yeah, I was thinking 5. So let's go ahead and go with that. So Mr. Andersen, please go ahead.
Thanks,
okay. Thanks so much for, thank you, Chair Schmidt, and to the board and the staff. I came before you, this body a year ago, I believe, after 3395 had passed to say, hello, I'm a babe in the woods in regard to a lot of your practices, your policies, all the considerations here. I'm just trying to serve as a bridge between, I work for a sustainability think tank. I'm just trying to serve as a bridge between advocates who see this as an opportunity to allow multifamily building on smaller lots. That's the fundamental challenge we're trying to solve here, to make it geometrically possible to allow infill on pretty small lots. And so are there an alternative set of safety measures that can be come up with that hold a building at a comparable or better level of safety to having that additional staircase? As 3395 says, it is the policy of the state to try and find such solutions if possible. And our argument is, let's figure out, let's find out what's possible. Let's talk about this. I worked with Stephen Smith at the Center for Building North America to put together the proposal that went before the committee. And we included in our proposal a sort of a set of branching options in the hopes that it would be sort of a way to start a conversation. The committee decision was to hold an up or down vote on our proposal as submitted. And so that was understandably rejected because it wasn't code ready. Anyway, there was a good conversation. I think a bunch of valid points were raised, I would say, on both sides. And the direction we were advised by the staff and committee, as I heard it, was to talk further with local jurisdictions about the possibility of advancing local amendments to the code on some schedule. I know Tom Gillespie, one of the committee members, has advocated for including some sort of an appendix or some sort of code giving a sense of the state's blessing for this direction of conversation. I don't know what your will is on that or your recommendation, but I know there's a recommendation in the packet to refer this to a work group in 2025 potentially. So I'm bringing just the further information that we had a meeting. I was me, 3 or 4 architects, and a affordable housing developer who would like to use this provision as soon as possible on a live project, if possible. With the city of Portland, we talked to Jody Orison, Matt Rizal, and Michael Silva from the Fire Bureau there about the possibilities. I thought it was a pretty productive conversation. I don't, we're not exactly dialed in on something they could all, both folks on both sides of this, all sides of this could agree on exactly. But I think that it's nearing the state where like we've got a solid proposal that we think could pass muster with those folks in the city of Portland. At the same time, there is a conversation in the city of Bend. I've talked with some advocates there who independently started talking about the exact same issue and are talking to some officials there. So there's multiple conversations in multiple jurisdictions. As a practical matter, this building type is not likely to be built in any but a handful of cities in this state where you've got unusually low demand for parking and unusually high prices. So from a political, for advocacy perspective, I'm working with a think tank. So I guess from a policy perspective for me, we're hoping to find some sort of path to let those handful of cities pursue this if it's deemed feasible by their local officials. I think there are lots of different ways, it seems to me, that this could potentially happen. And yeah, so those are my cards on the table. I'm happy to continue to be part of this conversation. I know a bunch of other people are, both in the industry and in the government, hoping to find a path to coming up with some safe rules that would allow this to happen. I know it is the city of Portland's stated policy that in its recent housing production strategy that it really wants to find a way to yes on this, according to the council decision. And I hope that we can be part of that. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Okay, thank you for the comment. And let me check in with Chief Rocco as well. Maybe Tony, if you could, for the board, maybe see what's in the agenda item. You want to maybe provide a little bit of synopsis about some of the conversations. Sounds like this is a topic that is definitely evolving. And it sounds like, at least from the materials, looks like even at a national, model code level and things like that. Definitely understanding that maybe, sounds like Mr. Anderson, some conversations with City of Portland and Bend. And I know Portland typically is sometimes ahead of the curve on some of these things. So want to be able to be mindful of that, but also on the national stage, if you could just maybe fill the board in a little bit, Chief Rocco, on some of the conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. For the record, again, Tony Rocco with the division, and thanks to Mr. Anderson for being here and for participating in the committee meetings. So to give a little bit of context on this, so just as far as what we're looking for and timeline wise, there needs to be some type of decision on the, on the OSSC front, right? Because we're up against that publishing deadline. And so we have to start getting into, publishing. And so, and if that is something where the board decides to uphold what the committee voted, then as recommended in the packet, we would want to continue the discussion. And a part of that is there was a recent symposium on the topic, national symposium. We are awaiting an NFPA technical report from that symposium, unless it dropped yesterday, and I'm not aware of it. And so what I understand is that the anticipation of that document is sometime before the hearings in California, the ICC hearings in California. So just a couple of weeks away, I think. And so yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely, from the proponents' perspective, there's a bunch of kind of viable safeguard options. As far as what we have, the tools and the flexibility that we already have, this could be approved on a site-specific basis, project-specific basis already, right? So, I mean, you could reference the performance-based code. We have very flexible local building official discretion in Chapter 1. You could go through 104.10 in the OSSC, and this could absolutely be approved on on a site-specific basis, but looking for something that's, I guess, more consistent and predictable for the handful of municipalities, as Mr. Andersen put it, that would be interested in something like this. I think that's what could come out of a work group. And so, but you have all sorts of potential options on the table. As far as you could look at doing some type of prospective local amendment where preemption is not a concern under 455.040. Where let's say it's an appendix, because that was thrown out there. So it's an appendix that is already built for a municipality to adopt. So it doesn't apply anywhere until the municipality acts and adopts it, but they don't have to go through that 040 preemption process because it's already been vetted by the division. So that's one option, just kind of off the top of my head. Yeah, and if there's anything else I could add, detail wise, or any other information or answer any questions, I'm happy to.
Okay, thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Let me go ahead and open it up to the board discussion. Or I guess, is there any questions of Mr. Andersen, or actually just open it up for any conversations or questions for Chief Rocco?
Through the chair, Eric, Andy Dykeman, board member. This might be a standard policy question, and I probably should know it, but if the technical report comes out and the jurisdictions are waiting, knowing they can do a site-specific path if they chose to, but it sounds like everybody's sort of waiting for some consistent alignment. If the technical report comes out at national, and the task force comes together and puts some recommendations together around the technical report that moves this in a way that might be more aligned, what's the timing that this could come out on an interim basis, or would we have to wait for a full code cycle update?
Thank you for the question, Vice Chair. Again, Tony Rocco with the division, for the record. So there is no waiting. There wouldn't be any type of mandate to wait for the next iteration of the OSSC. We could absolutely do an interim amendment. And as far as when the timing, who knows? We anticipate, as I said during my report, that the 25 OSSC would become effective, not mandatorily implemented statewide, but effective on October 1st of next year. So it could even be like a turnaround, like an interim amendment right after that effective date, potentially. It just depends on all of those details, how swiftly a theoretical work group would move on the topic, all those types of pieces, if that helps.
Yeah, it does. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Vice Chair. Other questions? Okay. I think from my perspective, I hear everything. I think that it's definitely want to hear if there's anything else from the other board. Does seem like, I think, Chief, to your point, it's like this is moving, there's work, but for our work today, we've got to be able to make a decision here and keep our process moving forward from a code adoption perspective. So, Gary, please go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Gary Heikkinen. I'm sensitive to cost issues, obviously, and looks like people all want to get to some level of solution. I'm hesitant to vote against the technical committee's recommendation, but I also do like the suggestion of putting together a working group to come up with a solution, waiting for national direction on this. So I very much in favor, I think, of following the review committee's recommendation and forming up a work group to continue to work on this, because it does, and especially in the city of Portland, a little bit more of an important issue. So thank you.
Thank you, Gary. I guess let me ask, is that, Gary, let me ask, is that a motion? There is some motion language that is available within our board packet, if that's a motion that you wish to move forward. There's also, you can add some additional language as it relates to recommendations around a work group. But I'm not sure if you're quite ready for that, or if you'd like to have any other discussion.
Well, I'm ready to make a motion, then we could also continue to have discussion, correct?
Yes, yeah, we can have discussion on the motion for sure.
Now, and maybe as just a process question here, do we need two separate motions? In other words, if I want to provide a motion to approve and uphold the technical review committee's decision, do we then need a second motion for the work group? Or can we wrap it all into one?
Hi, Gary, for the record, Pierre Spot, Policy Council Division. We can combine it all into one motion. You can say approve and uphold the technical review committee's decision, and then also recommend the division create the work groups. You can just put it all into one if you prefer.
Well, then maybe I'll do that. I'll make a motion to approve and uphold the technical review committee's unanimous disapproval of public code amendment proposal PP-02, and additionally to recommend the division to convene a 2025 work group to explore the topic further after additional national information becomes available, and to possibly develop a recommendation for future consideration by the board, including concepts for a possible prospective local adoption appendix.
Okay, thank you, Member Heikkinen. We've got a motion on the floor. And so I don't believe it requires a second, but let me go ahead and ask if there's any questions on that motion before we ask for a roll call vote. Okay, hearing none. I guess Pierre or Katie, could we please do a roll call on this?
Marshall McGrady,
Aye.
Brenda Hartzog,
Aye.
Gary Heikkinen,
Aye.
Lora Ratcliff,
Aye.
Vice Chair Andrew Dykeman,
Aye.
and Chair Eric Schmidt.
Aye.
Vote was unanimous.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Andersen, for the time this morning. And it sounds like that this is definitely going to be moving forward, so look forward to seeing it coming back. Okay, all right. We will move to the next order of business, which is the board review of the provisions of Chapter 1 of the 2025 Oregon Structural Specialty Code. Let me again turn it over to Pierre Sabat and Tony Rocco for some introductory and information on this agenda item.
Thank you, Chair Schmidt, members of the board. Once again, my name is Pierre Sabat, Policy Council of the Division. As Chair Schmidt stated, this agenda item is to review the provisions of Chapter 1 of the 2025 Oregon Structural Specialty Code. These provisions can be found on our committee webpage, which will hopefully come on the screen soon so that everyone can potentially see these provisions. Some background. At this iteration of the codes committee meetings, the committee discussed the technical provisions of the board selected national model codes, which is the existing Oregon amendments from current code and technical proposals from the public. While the administrative provisions of Chapter 1 are bifurcated from the code technical review, the chapter in its entirety was reviewed with the committee to identify proposed adjustments. This primarily administrative chapter does contain certain technical considerations, which are the focus of today's technical review. Chair Rocco is here to kind of pilot this with us. I do want to clarify to the board that today's Building Code Structures Meeting Board does serve as the Rulemaking Advisory Committee for these adjusted provisions of Chapter 1 of the OSSC for 2025. So the board and interested members of the public will be acting as members of the Rulemaking Advisory Committee. And specifically for this Rulemaking Advisory Committee portion, the group must consider the potential fiscal and economic impacts of this rulemaking and potential racial equity impacts of this rulemaking. We'll start this discussion with the Rulemaking Advisory Committee portion. We will then close that portion of the Rulemaking Advisory Committee, and then we'll go to a board-only discussion if additional discussion is needed, and then we'll do a motion with the board only. So the first part of the discussion will be rulemaking advisory committee, and then we'll shift over to a board only discussion, if that makes sense. If you have any questions on that portion, let me know. Otherwise, Chief Rocco is here to kind of talk about chapter 1 provisions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Pierre. Yeah, you might need to, we'll probably need to.
Yeah.
Release me
I
through that a
I
little
will
bit
jump
more.
in to make sure when we move from RAC back to the board only, I will make sure I'll let the board know, but just this portion will be open to the public, so. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, thank you. Chief Rocco.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the board again. For the record, Tony Rocco with the division. So we're looking primarily at the technical provisions within chapter 1. And so it is a bit difficult to separate those administrative provisions. In the memo in your packet, it explains that a little bit. We have received feedback on the administrative provisions, and so that feedback is under consideration. In particular, we received a list of comments from the city of Portland and Jody Orson. Thanks for that, Jody. I see that she's on the call. And so so those comments are at the administrator's desk, and those are under consideration. But on the technical provision side, the biggest change I think occurs in 105.2, and that's the longstanding exempt from building permit subsection of chapter 1, and so these are technical provisions in nature, and they have been modified in the past by OBOA, for example, through public proposals. And really what we saw here is we wanted to align the longstanding gross floor area limitation of the non-occupied accessory structure that is exempt from building permits. Again, they're not exempt from MEP as applicable, right? You still have to pull MEP appropriately. But we wanted to align that with where we've been in the residential code for a number of years. And that's up to 200 square feet. And so on the building code side, historically it's been limited at model code level and in our code to 120 square feet. And so this was kind of a twofold approach. One, again, we're trying to provide more flexibility for something that is, not occupied, very low risk. It's not intended to be occupied. And again, this is just incidental accessory type storage, facilities. And two, I think we've been pretty clear about part of the intent is to address these unmodified shipping containers that are being placed, as accessory storage. They're being, placed all over our state and in different municipalities. There seems to be kind of an inconsistent approach for the regulation when they exceed that long-standing 120 square feet of gross floor area, even if they are, low risk, non-occupied, and meeting all that other criteria. And so there was a really good discussion about it. There was some feedback from the city of Portland on a concern about raising the gross floor area of the exemption, but only specifically to trash enclosures. And it was a valid point, very good point. They've had some documented issues with trash enclosures there. And so what we kind of did on the fly at the committee level is leave that 120 square foot, that long-standing permit exemption, leave that in place, keep it specific to those trash enclosures, and then add the 200 square foot increased flexibility for non-occupied review incidental structures for everything else that could fit those parameters, except for trash enclosure. And so you just basically, it would be, I think everything would stay the same as the current 22 iteration of the OSSC for trash enclosures, and for the exemption, 120 square feet. And then as proposed in front of you, it would increase to 200 square feet for everything else that meets that non-occupied review, low risk structure. So That's primarily the significant technical change. You know, as always, we do a little bit of adjusting as we kind of go through the code. What you'll see some adjustments in like 107.3.5 regarding fire life safety plan review and the historic alignment with kind of architects and engineers law for the 4,000 and ground floor area. We did a lot of research on that here at the division. It was kind of an arbitrary alignment in chapter 1, and so that it was only partially included in 107.3.5. So you'll see additional language there to kind of complete that package. You'll see some additional language throughout the construction documents section, just talking about just clarifying, you know, what we're talking about as far as design calculations, things like that on the submittal documents. But this in 105.2 is really the big technical change that's proposed in front of you. And as Pierre said, this is part of the RAC that is open to the public. I'm here for any technical support if there's any questions. Otherwise, I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Rocco. Questions from the board for either Chief Rocco or Pierre at this point in time?
I do have a question, Chair. Chief Rocco, in the fire code, it speaks to, you know, if there's a lid on the trash enclosure being non-combustible materials, is that going to move into the OSSC as well? If you know.
Through the chair, thank you for the question. I'm not aware of that being included in our integration, but it's definitely something that Eric and I've discussed, Eric McMullen and I have discussed, as far as putting kind of more parameters, either through a defined term for trash enclosure, or it could be, you know, as simple as pointing to that. And again, I think we'd only be looking at, you know, regulatory oversight of that if it were included for those that weren't exempt the building permit, of course, right? So I don't know if that helps.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question. Okay, so I guess Pierre, let me turn it back over to you procedurally. So if we're still we're in the rack right now?
Yes, Chair Schmidt. We are in the rack right now, and while we have the rack open, I would just like to once again present the question, of any, you know, potential fiscal impacts of this rulemaking or any racial equity impacts. We do have to address that for the record. So if there's any discussion on that, just have that on the rack record. And if there's any other additional discussion from the public or anyone, and then if not, we can close the rack formally and then move to board only discussion and with possible motion.
Okay, so when you talk about public, are we opening it up for public comment? Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, as a rulemaking advisory committee, it's open to members of the
sure.
public to, yes.
Okay. Okay, well, let's go ahead and open it up to the public. If there's any folks that wants to speak briefly on this item, if you want to, I guess, raise your hand and we can call upon you and get a public comment as it relates to this item. Okay, everybody's shy this morning. That's okay. All right. Okay, so Pierre, I think we will close that part of it down. Any additional housekeeping as it relates to making sure we address what you need us to address?
No, it looks good. If no one else has any discussion for the rack portion, we can formally close the rack, and then we can move to board only, just any other further board only discussion, and then we can make a motion if once you guys are ready. So sounds good, Chair Schmidt. Thank you. Okay, so we will now then move from our rule advisory committee, the RAC, and move it to now a board discussion on the agenda item itself. Again, a reminder that this is another item that does require a motion, and there will be a roll call vote. Let me go ahead and open it up for the committee, or I'm sorry, the board, and see if there's any questions that you have before we potentially entertain a motion. I guess just a point of clarification. I know mentioned that this is really covering the technical, and there's administrative provisions as well. Whether Chair or I think Alana's with us as well.
we have a tentative timeline response as it relates to incorporating any administrative, I guess, taking all the administrative things into account? What's the timeline on that?
I can jump in on this one, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Again, Tony Rocco with the division. And so as far as publishing goes, I mean, we'd be looking for some finality of any type of feedback that would be suggesting consideration of different language. We'd be looking for that pretty quickly. Now there's also, future opportunities to provide general public testimony, of course, moving forward all the way up through the public, rulemaking hearing. So, there are other opportunities. You can always submit written testimony after this meeting, for example, and then again at the public hearing for the associated rulemaking, which is, once the board makes a motion and has the finding attached to it, right? And you'll see in that the motion examples that it's to forward it to our administrator for rulemaking, and so that's that public hearing that's associated with it at the end. Hopefully that helps.
Yep, that sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I guess last question for me is that I know as Building Codes has done a great job over the past several years as it relates to educating building officials, et cetera, kind of what's in the code, what's not in the code. I call it the whatever circle of enlightenment or the donut or whatever else. As it relates to explaining that and kind of what's in and what's out, is that evolving as part of this code adoption? And I'm assuming there'll be subsequent information sent out on that as part of the code change classes, et cetera.
Yes, sir. Again, Tony Rocco of the division. Thanks for the question, Mr. Chairman. I do really like the circle of enlightenment, and may use that in the future. So yeah, absolutely. Nothing's changing currently as far as that the current the picture that we have and we share out often with local government partners. This chapter 1 doesn't change any of that currently. So, but yes, absolutely, it'll be covered. Typically, I'll do it. Sometimes Eric on our team, our assistant chief, will jump in and do that as well in the training program. And then, as always, we're here to support our local government partners. And so, if there's any other questions about it, or they want a fresh copy of that as it's updated, happy to send that. And then just a quick earmark note. The only thing that I'm aware of that will be changing in the near future is the R327 provisions of the OSSC as related to the statewide wildfire hazard map. And so that will go from, currently it's in the may category, right? Because it's a prospective local amendment, and it will go into the shall category for those areas that are mapped as high hazard. So just to note that, hopefully that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Chief. Yeah, I think the infographic's been very helpful the last several years. I think that helps, especially as we continue to have change, new building officials and things like that. I think it's helpful. So thank you very much. Okay, so let's go back to the agenda item itself. Are there any other questions or entertain a motion on this?
You ready for a motion? Yeah.
Yeah. If you guys are ready.
Yeah, I can submit a motion. Motion to approve the adjusted technical. Oh yeah, Vice Chair Andy Dykeman for the record. Motion to approve the adjusted technical provisions of Chapter 1 of the 2025 OSSC and forward to the administrator for rulemaking and subsequent adoption, with the finding that the added cost, if any, is necessary to the health and safety of the occupants or the public, or necessary to conserve scarce resources.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair. So we have a motion to approve on the floor. Any discussion on this before we ask for a roll call? Hearing none. Katie, could you please do a roll call on this?
Marshall McGrady,
Aye.
Brenda Hartzog,
Aye.
Gary Heikkinen,
Aye.
Lora Ratcliff,
Aye.
Andrew Dykeman, Vice Chair,
Aye.
and Chair Eric Schmidt.
Aye.
And the motion was unanimous.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the work on that with Chapter 1. I know that's definitely always a lift for sure. So appreciate the work on that. Let's move to our, I guess, arguably our main event, board review and approval of the 2025 Oregon Structural Specialty Code. This is also going to require a motion and a roll call vote. And let me go ahead and turn it over to Pierre and Tony once again to introduce and discuss this. I will go ahead and just preamble this a little bit, and I'm sure I believe I speak on behalf of all the board, in that we want to express our incredible appreciation for how much work goes into this every year there's something, but in this kind of a 3-year cycle, there's just a lot of folks that come together in a short amount of time, and they do a lot of work. And that's supported by the incredibly talented and dedicated team at Building Codes Division. So really appreciate everybody's work on this. It is a lot. I know it's a lot for us to just absorb, and really, entrusting the work and the folks that we've appointed as part of our committee to work on this. So I know we're not going to get into all the code changes, and that's not necessarily our role here, but definitely to be able to take this all into account and make a whatever appropriate motion the board would like to do going forward. But again, just wanted to appreciate everybody's work on this. And so with that, let me turn it over to Pierre and Chief Rocco.
Thank you once again, Chair Schmidt, members of the board. For the record, my name is Pierre Sabah, Policy Council Division. I hope the board today has enjoyed the appetizers of the meeting, because this is now the main course. So with that being said, this agenda item is to review and approve the 2025 Oregon Structural Specialty Code. Some background: ORS 455610 requires that the division, with the approval of the Building Code Structures Board, adopt minimum construction, reconstruction, alteration, and repair of buildings and other structures. These standards are adopted as the Oregon Structural Specialty Code. As Tony mentioned earlier today, the anticipated effective date for the 2025 Oregon Structural Specialty Code is October 1, 2025, with a 6-month phasing period that takes us to a mandatory date of April 1, 2025. Some background again for this cycle: the Code Committee had met 5 times between August 8, 2024 and September 17, 2024. Your board packet today includes the committee's matrix highlighting the draft changes, amendments, and technical code review committee's recommendations. Today's proposed changes do have a fiscal impact as identified in the supporting documents, and the division welcomes any additional feedback on the fiscal impact of these proposed changes. Like we did with the last agenda item, I will first open today's discussion for a rulemaking advisory committee. The board and any interested members of the public will be acting as members of the rulemaking advisory committee. And the group, I will ask again to consider any potential fiscal and economic impacts of this rulemaking and the potential racial equity impacts of this rulemaking as part of this RAC. Once that part of the RAC is done and I close it again, we will turn it over to Tony, who will then go kind of pilot this whole thing with the matrix and any questions the board may have about the actual OSSC. And that will be a board only discussion, and then we will do a motion. So now I will open the rulemaking advisory committee portion, which is open to all members of the public and the board. And I will ask the public and the board to consider any fiscal impacts of this rulemaking and any racial equity impacts of this rulemaking. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Pierre. And just point of clarification in your introductory statement, I think you'd mentioned April 1st, 2025 for an overall effective date.
Sorry.
April 2026.
Yeah, my brain's also on autopilot, clearly. April 1, 2026 would be the mandatory effective date. Thank you, Chair.
Absolutely. Just before we get into that item, I do want to make sure and introduce Shayla Duke. So Shayla is with us now. And so wanted to, again, welcome you, Shayla, to the Building Code Structures Board. Are you in person or are you online? I'm not sure. There you
I'm
go.
online.
Hi.
I'm so sorry. I was late. I had a family emergency.
Not a problem. I hope everything's okay, and just wanted to welcome you to the Building Code Structure Board. As I mentioned, you've joined the board here in the position representing the Oregon Disabilities Commission. Your term began October 1st of this year, and you're serving a partial 4-year term ending June 30th, 2028. So I want to welcome you to the Building Code Structures Board. And if you'd like to introduce yourself, or whatever you feel comfortable with this morning.
Okay, yeah, my name is Shayla Duke. I'm a commissioner with the Oregon Disabilities Commission. I'm glad to be here. I do have a background in construction administration, both commercial and residential. So I know a little bit, but no expert by any means. But I'm glad to be representing Oregonians with disabilities today and moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here and welcome. Okay, let me go ahead and go back to our agenda item. So I think Chief Rocco, let me go ahead and turn it over to you. As I think you're going to kind of guide us through this matrix in a summary level and maybe hit a few high points along the way.
Sorry to interrupt, Chair Schmidt, Pierre Sabah.
Oh yeah,
we'll have Tony do that after the rulemaking advisory committee portion.
Oh, my apologies.
Yeah,
My apologies.
no, you're fine. We're just gonna keep the discussion open for the public and the board right now.
Okay.
And to answer any questions, my questions about, potential fiscal impacts or racial equity, if anyone wants to speak on that at this portion for the rulemaking advisory committee from either the public or the board. If there's no discussion or no questions, we can close the rack and then we can move on to Tony kind of going through the matrix of the board. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So let me ask the board members, any questions or discussion for you before we open it up for public comment? Okay, hearing none, let me go ahead and open it up for the public comment. If there's any folks that would like to, any public comment on this, we want to open it up as part of the rack. Feel free to raise your hand, your virtual hand, or in person. All right, I am not seeing any. I think, Pierre, we are good to go.
Yeah, we will now close the rulemaking advisory committee and we'll move back into the board only discussion of the 2025 OSSC. As you said, I will turn it over to Chief Rocco for technical discussion. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
All right,
thank you,
Chief,
Mr. Chairman.
you want to introduce yourself again? I don't think we've said it enough today.
Again, very record. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Pierre. Yeah, so the plan is, we've done this. I think many of the board members have been through this before. We've done it kind of in different ways, but I think what I'm planning on doing is just kind of rolling through the matrix. There's a few items that I'm going to highlight. We can absolutely stop at any time. You just got to stop me. We can discuss any particular item. There might be an item that I skip over that you want to hear a little bit more about. It's all at your pleasure, to the board members. So I'm just going to start discussing things. You just go through the matrix that is in your packet, and then again, you can handle this in one sweeping motion. If there's any things that you pull out to amend, you can absolutely include that in a motion. And with that, I'll get started here. So we covered chapter 1 separately in a separate agenda item this morning, so we don't have to worry about that. And really what we do with chapter 2 is chapter 2 kind of gets defined based on all the other work in the other chapters, right? So we actually kind of do chapter 2 at the end, in my experience here at the division. So for the last 13 or so years. Keeping that in mind, we're going to start then in chapter 3. Really the biggest item here in chapter 3 to highlight is matrix item 3-2 in your packet. And this has to do with care facilities within dwellings. And the outcome here is that there were no technical changes at all. But there was some participation from Rose, who's actually on the call now, which was really appreciated. And Jody from the city of Portland that engaged quite a bit on this, and then Lora from our team, as well as the remaining technical team members. We kind of got into this and tried to simplify all of these references. So at the model code level, the only care facilities which are allowed in dwellings, again, in the national model code, is for 5 or fewer. And then all types of care is allowed, right? So medical care, you could potentially have a hospital in a dwelling for 5 or fewer folks under the national model code, custodial care, child care, daycare, things like that. Those are all scoped separately under the IRC, and they're limited to 5 or fewer. And so you have this language throughout the National Model Code that's pretty clunky. And so in the 22 OSSC iteration, we added language specific to these very uniquely defined and scoped licensed facilities in Oregon. And so, but we still have this leftover kind of 5 or fewer thing that really isn't aligned. It doesn't mean anything to us. Either you're subject to licensure by the state here in Oregon, or you're not. You're exempt. And so we worked on cleaning this up. A part of that was to also add terminology to the R4 group in Chapter 3. And so I just wanted to take a moment there. No fiscal, no technical changes, but a lot of cleanup, and with the customer in mind. So easier navigation, of the provisions, less redundancy throughout the group I's and E's and the R's, of course. And so, again, just want to point that out. No fiscal. Going to keep rolling here. In 3-8, matrix item 3-8, section 310.5, that's where you see that what I just mentioned, that group R4 for conditions 1 and 2. You'll see that in the subsection 310.5.2, the committee recommended adding the residential training facilities under the group R4 condition 2, the condition that is subject to licensure by the state. And this is where Rose participated as well, and Jody kind of led the charge, which is really appreciated. That's going to be great. I think that's going to then have a place for those facilities to land when they're in that 6 to 16. Remember, R4 is that 6 to 16 space. We're going to keep on going. In Chapter 4, so as you all probably recall, this is where the lion's share of the International Fire Code integration comes in. So you'll remember the Appendix N effort of quite a few years ago now, where we tried to take all of the new construction provisions of the International Fire Code, which serves as the base model code for the OFC here in Oregon, and take those new construction provisions and print them in an appendix in the OSSC. And so we've evolved quite a bit since then. And so in Chapter 4 is where you find the majority of the model IFC provisions. Part of the agreement there with the State Fire Marshal's Office is that we try to leave the provisions that are taken from the model IFC, we try to leave them unmodified to the greatest extent possible, right? So there are some things where we have to change it from fire official to building official, or things like that. But for the most part, everything that we integrate, that's kind of the goal, is to not modify it. And our Assistant Chief Eric leads this charge. Always does a phenomenal job, communicating with our fire service colleagues. And then we also had Mr. Matt Avis on the technical review committee, which was fantastic to have his participation. One of the big pieces here is that you'll see we have the 4-13, section 430, the ESS language. So remember, in the 22 iteration, the ESS language was new. So one of the big things that we're noting is kind of a significant effort, from the review committee, is taking the 2027 IBC and I believe IFC lithium ion provisions and take those ahead of the National Model Code and integrate them into what would be our 25 OSSC. And so a group of committee members kind of split off to take this on. Jody, Tom Gillespie, I know I'm going to leave somebody out, but there were a couple other committee members. Matt Amos participated, and then we had Mr. Forrester, Steve Forrester from QEF&R, lend his time and expertise to kind of getting these organized from the 27 national model process and make them work, in our code. And so it was basically, due to an increased nationwide on the recent history of fires involving those lithium-ion batteries. There were multiple kind of cleanups and additional provisions. And overall, the fiscal impact, as it's noted in your matrix, was a net reduction. I think there was maybe some discussion about one of them being an increase, even though it was categorized as a decrease nationally. But overall, it's pretty close. The best thing is that it's a cleanup, and so it's cleaning up all of those new ESS language, making the lithium ion stuff and the EV stuff very linear. And one of the notes that I had listed is that the provision that was related to parking facilities that allow EVs to park within them, open parking, public parking garages, and related to sprinklers, that national proposal was not included. So again, that was not included in what we took from the national model code. And I know, Mr. Chairman, that has come up in your municipality in particular. We've talked about that at this board previously, and so I just wanted to just note that. And so that might be something that we see, later down the road in the future, being a point of discussion or, a provision that is approved nationally. But again, I just wanted to note that. So, really, thanks to Jody and to Steve and to all the committee members and to Eric, who made this happen. I think it's a big win for our OSSC when we're able to kind of cherry pick the best stuff from the national model process ahead of cycle. So as we move through chapter 4, you're going to see the majority of them are retained, and then you see item 4-18. I got a little bit ahead of myself, but that's where you see the call out for the lithium ion stuff. You'll see all those the referenced IFC proposals. The F2121 series is where it starts. You can kind of roll through that as you're reviewing or looking over it. That takes us pretty much through chapter 4 and up to chapter 5. Chapter 5, there weren't a lot of kind of earth-shattering changes in chapter 5. One of the things that we did note is that there was a good change in 5085 for live work units. So remember, live work units are unique because they're under the scope of the OSSC in our state. And so when they're associated with a detached 1 and 2 family dwelling townhouse, right? So they're right up front, not language in the OSSC. And it used to, for many iterations, it was section 419, or that 419 of the OSSC. You'd have to go over there and comply with that. As long as you did that, then you could build your live work under the Resi code. And one of the amendments that we had to introduce in the 22 OSSC had to do with the sprinkler system that was required for these facilities. Because remember this, the way they treat live work units is that the entire live work unit gets a group R2 designation, and then they have to be provided with a sprinkler system throughout both the dwelling side of it and the business side of it. And so when they're located within a detached 1 and 2 family dwelling or townhouse, long-standing allowance has been to permit that sprinkler system to be a 13B system, a dwelling system. And that was missing. That little nuance was missing from the code for, I think, like half a cycle. And so we had to add that as an amendment under the 22 iteration. And the nice thing is that the national model kind of caught up with us there. So you see that item listed at 5-3 for those that are keeping score at home on the matrix. Moving through, we're going to jump chapter 6. We really only have one thing listed there, and it's just retaining an existing organ amendment. And we'll move on to chapter 7. And there were 2 things that I wanted to note here in chapter 7. No, I think. Excuse me, I don't think it was in chapter. Oh, yes, sorry. So the existing organ amendment regarding vertical exposure. So that's 7-4. I always like to pit stop on this one because it's a really unique part of code, right? It's one of the only parts of code where we address adjacent lots, right? Like we never contemplate that. So when you get a plan set in, what are you looking at? You're looking at the boundary of that tax law, right? You're looking at fire separation distance for that new proposed structure. You're not looking at what's adjacent to it. So this is a unique provision that really originated in the city of Portland, probably where it most often gets applied. And we've cleaned it up, over the past couple of iterations with some input from back when Terry was still there, from the city of Portland. And so I like to point that out. The committee obviously retained that existing amendment, and that is 7-4. So you'll see here that there's really no fiscal on any of these items. There was a clarification extending an exception under item 7-19 for exterior curtain wall, FRR floor intersections and floor assembly, basically joints or intersections there. That was a net cost decrease. Another thing to remember at the national model code level is that the question regarding fiscal and the extent of it is, will this impact the cost of construction? Will this increase the cost of construction? It's a yes, no. So yes or no, right? So we don't get into any level of detail on the fiscal side as nearly as what we do here in Oregon. So moving through chapter 7, just one thing I wanted to briefly point out in chapter 8 is item 8-3. So remember in the 22 OSSC, Jeremy Williams from our team, our program engineer, did a lot of work with kind of aligning the T-bar provisions. So we have that long-standing reference in 808 that is just like, out of the blue. In chapter 8, we have this reference to T-bar grid and compliance path, and now we really cleaned that path up. We also cleaned up the associated interps on the topic that provide kind of a prescriptive option for folks, and those get used all the time. We know the CISCA document isn't used anymore, but the Northwest Ceiling Bureau, Ceiling and Wall and Ceiling Bureau document, the TD 401 still is used. And Jeremy also participated in rewriting that, or at least, helping on the code side of rewriting that for the Northwest. And so I'd just like to point that out. We're retaining that based on the committee recommendations. In chapter 9, a couple of things to just point out there. We have, you do see in 9-12, you see the lithium ion kind of continuation, the extension of what we talked about in chapter 4, and pulling those 2027 IACC proposals, and that one's F11124. And so then you see that, and then in red, you see that committee note there, as Lora has captured for us. Let's see here. There was one other one that I wanted to touch down on. Here we go. We're getting there. I know we are. Okay, so it's 9-41. And then we're also going to cover 9-42. So 9-41 is a new requirement in the National Model Code for a risk analysis in accordance with NFPA 72 to be conducted for certain new Group E buildings. And so remember, Group E is over, I believe the threshold's 100. Over 100 occupants, you already have EVACs requirements, right? Emergency Voice Alarm Communication System, EVACs requirements in Chapter 9. Now, what this does is if you have a new Group E building that has an occupant load threshold of greater than 500, so this could be a new gym, supporting a group, an existing Group E. It could be a new building associated with an existing Group E, or it could just be a new Group E altogether that meets the threshold of over 500 occupants. All it requires is that a risk analysis be conducted in accordance with 72 to determine if the mass notification pieces, those pieces that we see, we're familiar with from like stadiums and similar occupancies, if those pieces need to be added to the EVACs system, which is already a requirement. And so obviously you're going to see a fiscal impact there for the report, for the analysis to be conducted when you hit that 500 occupant threshold. And then whether or not those additional costs are included if the risk analysis says, yes, we need to add those mass notification pieces to the emergency voice alarm communication system that's already required under this risk analysis. There would be a fiscal associated with that as well. Very difficult to kind of identify what that fiscal would look like. But we did see, the approximations for the risk analysis, the report and analysis itself. It's really all that code's requiring initially. So again, that's 9-41. And another piece of that is that we have seen reports of schools using this for other purposes. Remember the old intercoms? I don't think they use those anymore. I think they have some additional systems here. We've seen these used for just kind of notifying, whether it be for a lockdown situation, where it's not a mass evacuation. It's actually like a getting information out to their teachers and students very quickly, using those tools and system components. 9-42, it's section 918, and we used to refer to this as ERG. And as you recall, that this was under, there was a lot of engagement from board members, board member Mr. Forrester at the time. There was a lot of engagement from the fire service, from the electrical industry, from a lot of local government partners, stakeholders, and other customers, and we've come a long way, from where it started. And they always have to change the name a little bit. And so instead of emergency responder radio coverage, it's now changed to emergency responder communication enhancement systems. The biggest thing here is that we still get the increased survivability stuff that we addressed last iteration under the 22 OSSC, so that stays the same. And then no scoping changes. And I think that's probably the most important as far as what it applies to, which building types. That list, I believe it's 5. That list is not changing as part of this. What did change, there are some more specific provisions on the, kind of on the frequency, on the stuff where the fire, it's under the fire official authority. There were some changes there, and overall just kind of some cleanup about the entire systems. One of the things we have flagged there, you'll see the third bullet point up from the bottom and item 9-42 is we have to update the form accordingly. So we have a required form, remember that, where you have to get the fire service member involved, because then that notifies them and then they're engaged. So that's an important piece. And then it provides a little bit of predictability and consistency for the customer. So that form, it's form OSSC 918. We do have that flagged for update, and we'll have that done ahead of the original implementation effective date of October 1 of next year. Am I going too slow, too fast? Any comments from the board?
Anything? No, I think I'm good. Is the rest of the board okay? Yep, thumbs up, I see.
Okay, great.
Need some water?
Thank you. No, I'm doing all right. I got it right here. Thank you. Okay, so now we're into chapter 10. Just gonna again kind of highlight the more significant items that we saw in chapter 10. So what you'll see in item 10-3, you'll see the prior agenda item there with public proposal 02. If you're interested in looking at what that committee discussion was, very a robust discussion. It was quite thorough. If you're interested in seeing that, Lora has done a great job of just linking the exact piece of the committee video where you can just click on that from within your board packet, review that. So again, that's item 10-3 for those keeping score at home. As we move through, we get down to item, I think we'll pit stop at 10-9, section 1013.7, titled Pictograms. Excuse me, I think this was a great public proposal, and just, I mean, the committee was just knocking it out of the park, every meeting, but they addressed this one quite well. And so this was a proposal to allow the pictogram that we've all seen from the Eurocode. It's the outline of an individual kind of running towards an exit instead of the word exit. It's typically green and white. And so that was the public proposal, was to allow that in lieu of exit signage. And so the committee didn't think that was appropriate. And what they recommended is that it would be allowed specifically as an option. You could argue that it's currently allowed today already. Again, backing up to flexibility and discretionary authority and alternative equivalence. But this will put it in as a linear option in code. So I think that's an interesting one. And again, the committee discussion, the committee video is pasted into your matrix if you're interested. And so in red there, the committee recommends approving the proposal as modified by making the provisions optional and not in lieu of the current requirements. So you could provide it in addition to, and then of course, again, building officials retain broad discretionary authority to approve things on a site basis in lieu of potentially. Guards, right below that on 10.15.2, it does not have a number, it's asterisk there. And this was a great one. I believe Jody brought this up, and then I think Adelie engaged on it as well. But this was just adding some specific language, kind of pointing back to where guards are required for regulated retaining walls. And then the one below it is what I was thinking about, where the IBC adds provisions for occupiable roofs and guards associated with that. And the committee recommends approving the IBC changes as modified by deleting approved in exception 9. So the committee was just doing great work, reviewing the language, getting, catching things that maybe our technical team hadn't even thought of in our initial review of the National Model Code. So that's another example of it there. All right, Chapter 11. So a couple of things here in Chapter 11 that are important to note, especially for our new board member. Really the primary thing to note here is that, again, we have this, when we're looking at parking in Oregon, right, we have a specific statute in 447.223 that directs folks for parking on affected building sites to those standards that are adopted by the Oregon Transportation Commission in consultation with the Oregon Disabilities Commission. And so that's where we have these standards. You see that kind of throughout your matrix. So like, for example, 11-8 is a great one to refer to there, dealing with that specific pointer. And then again, we have more specific requirements in Oregon that are different from the federal standard, that are different from what the National Model Code requires, different from what the A117.1 designates in their parking provisions. And so there is a little bit of a dance kind of in the scoping language of Chapter 11 to make sure that we're getting folks to the right thing for the appropriate standards to be used in the design. So you see that there. One of the really good discussions that we had is 11-14 for those keeping score at home. 1106.11. This is regarding EV charging stations. And so again, remember in Oregon, nothing requires EV charging stations currently. There's no path to require them. They are voluntary. And when they're voluntarily installed on a site, our historic and longstanding guidance has been, well, if it's on an affected building site, then it absolutely is an element of an affected building site that's intended for common public use. That it must be accessible, must be served by an accessible route, must be within reach ranges, must be, meeting the operational control parameters that we would require of any accessible element. I guess the downside of that is that we never had a number or a threshold of like, well, how many of them? If the customer voluntarily added 6, EV charging stations, how many of those would be required to be accessible? Under the National Model Code and under the U.S. Access Board recommendations and guidelines, not all of them, but that's what we were stuck with because we really didn't have anything in code. So we would say that would be our recommendation to make all of them accessible. Well, now, based on the committee's work and the discussions, so now we have this new language, not only referencing the appropriate pieces of the A117.1 design standard for these charging stations when voluntarily installed, but also we have now a percentage. I believe I want to say it's 5%, but not less than 1. It could be 2%, but not less than 1. But again, it's just consistent with the National Model Code now. So providing some guidance that not all of them would have to be served by a separate independent accessible route. Not all of them have to meet, the parameters for accessible elements. What I've seen on my research is that the vast majority of the ones that are readily available or used throughout states like California and Colorado, they already meet all the accessible provisions. So really, the only piece would be being served by an accessible route. But that's again just based on my independent research. So we do have some really good new language there. Kudos to the committee for working through that one. The next one that I want to pit stop on is 11-27 for adult changing stations. The national proposal was E14221, and this was quite controversial at the national level. It was championed by Marcia Maz. Maybe some of you know Marcia. Great, fantastic, kind of salt of the earth person who used to be with the U.S. Access Board. And so what she did, she proposed this requirement to have adult changing stations in certain facilities where I want to say it was like where you reached an aggregate of at least 6 water closets and urinals. So we're talking larger facilities, right, to have that occupant load to drive that aggregate of 6 total, to create this requirement for an adult changing table or changing station within a single user family assisted use toilet room. A lot of discussion about this. One of the things that we were concerned about is that this topic of changing stations and changing tables being a mandatory requirement has been on our legislature's radar through proposed bills previously in multiple legislative sessions, most recently in 2019. And they've every time been left in committee and not moved through the process or moved further prior to adjournment. And so we consider this an occupied field. We're not saying it's not important, but what we're saying is that it would be inappropriate, I think, to then kind of go over the top of where the legislature has already acted by inaction on the topic and then say, oh, well, we're going to require it now because it's required at the national level. So what we did is we kind of did a compromise. So what we did is we left the language in code that says when you voluntarily provide an adult changing station, it must be accessible. And then we also recommend in the recommendation include supplement 1 of A117.1 2017. And that's the only topic that's included in supplement 1. And so that's what you would see, assuming that the board approves that item of the committee's recommendation. Then you'd see in chapter 35, you'd see under ICC, and even though it's an ANSI document, under ICC, it would be A117.1 2017, and then it would say supplement 1, or it would have a reference there to supplement, which is available, I believe, for free as a spring supplement to the major standard 17 iteration of A117.1. So we noted that there. So, and you'll see that in red on 11-27 in the body of the table. Committee recommends the approval of the first sentence requiring them to be accessible, and they'll only apply when those are voluntarily provided in the design. But then you'll have all the parameters to cite, and then it'll meet all the criteria that's in supplement 1. And so all those pieces will be there. All right, moving on through. I think we're gonna. One thing to pit stop in on chapter 12, interior environment, is item 12-1. It's the first item on the matrix under Chapter 12, board ventilation. And this is pretty significant. But what we did is we took everything that has to do with ventilation of your indoor breathing zones for occupants and users of buildings. We moved it to mechanical code. So what we've had this split approach where Chapter 12 allows you to have natural ventilation. It tells you how to accomplish natural ventilation. And then, but if you want to do mechanical ventilation, then you got to go to the mechanical code. And then in some instances, you have to do mechanical ventilation. You don't have an option to do natural ventilation. So it's convoluted and confusing. And so what we did is we only kept the ventilation of those non-occupied spaces, the attics, underfloors, that stuff in Chapter 12, and then ventilation of the actual occupied space, occupiable space. Those go to the mechanical code. So that's part of the publishing effort. We're going to kind of clean that up. Anytime I can send provisions to Mark Heizer, I'm happy to do so. So that's what we're doing there. Is we're just having a pointer over to that, and then on the mechanical side, which will impact obviously our local government partners and our customers and stakeholders, is that currently the recommendation from the mechanical committee to the mechanical board, which hasn't been heard yet, is significantly increasing the ventilation rate for dwellings. And so that impacts a lot of things, right? Under the mechanical code, it would be all apartments, everything that's scoped under the OSSC for residential dwellings, and then it could include those low-rise dwellings, right? Because then we have that other piece, that 3-story or less, and interior door for each unit as defined in ORS 455-010. And so I think those are the pieces that are going to be considered at the mechanical board level. So if you're interested in engaging in that, for those folks, local government partners or folks in the public that are on the call, that'll be through the mechanical board at the next meeting, I believe, where they'll be talking about that recommendation from the committee, which does have a significant fiscal associated with it, right? And it changes things from where we've been. And I believe it changes things beyond what the model code allows or requires. So just want to touch down on that right there in Chapter 12. And we're going to keep on going. We're going to skip over everything in Chapter 14. Not a lot there. It's some real good cleanup though on the model code stuff, especially when you're looking at foam plastic insulating sheathing. There's some new provisions there, 1404, addressing it, especially when you start talking about when they're trying to use it on buildings of taller height. You still have that limitation there, 1405.11, item 14-12, where you have that limitation of 40 feet above grade. And so again, just clean up really in Chapter 14 is all I saw. Chapter 15, let's see if there was anything critical there. Oh, there was a good discussion of, so 15-25, we will pit stop there, 15-25 lightning protection systems. And so this is interesting because lightning protection systems, even though it's a component of a building, it's actually under the authority of the Electrical and Elevator Board here in Oregon. So it's one of those things where it was like, well, the committee could kind of recommend something, but then it would have to go to you, and then you would have to then recommend it to the Electrical and Elevator Board before it could be approved. And so I talked with our electrical chief, Brian Price, and Brian said, yeah, absolutely, it's under the authority of the EE board. And so again, we just kind of pointed to the electrical code and leaving that under their discretion for what an LPS is, what it looks like, how it's accomplished, what wiring installation needs to be used, as well as what licensed folks need to be doing the work. And so that just pit stop in there at 1525. I think that's it. There was some language added to The re-roofing provisions. So remember here in Oregon, we have that under 5-31 for those keeping score at home, 1512, 3.1 and 3.11. Under 1512, the general subsection, we have re-roofing provisions, and then we have that permissible allowance for re-roofing here. And so you can require that, pre-inspection to really kind of see what's going on before they do the re-roofing, or after they do tear off. That's what I've seen most commonly. To take a look and see what's really going on there on the existing building, and as well as the final inspection. And then I think it reiterates the ability to kind of accept reports from an approved agency, which is redundant, of course, with Chapter 1 and Chapter 17. But just want to point that out while we're going through Chapter 15. Chapter 16, we're getting into the structural design stuff. Big Chapter 16. We're going to pit stop there at 16.4. Is going to be the first one that we stop at. But before we get to that, a couple of things I just wanted to note. So similar to our Assistant Chief Eric's exceptional work on kind of the integration of the IFC provisions in the structural design space, Jeremy Williams, our program engineer, has just done a phenomenal job of coordinating with SEAO. He's been, participating or sitting in on some of their code committee meetings. I think just kind of as a, just provide support, not as an active participant. And of course, as you know, SEAO has got it's a great bunch of folks. They really analyze a lot of these issues. They're involved at ASCE, committees. They're engaged in all of this stuff, and it's really, really helpful to have their engagement. It's just been great having Jeremy kind of make sure that they're, aware of the adoption process, that they're engaged, and it's just been a great, just kind of reaffirming that kind of that interaction and engagement with SEAO. And so the majority of Chapter 16 through 23 and a little bit in Chapter 34 that we'll talk about was coordinated, through that SEAO code committee. A lot of great proposals that were approved by the committee. We had some engagement from Amit. We had engagement from Chris Wong. We had engagement from Seth and Ryan that was on the committee. We had it was really great to have them participating. And so one of the biggest changes you'll see is we're switching from 716 to 722. So that's a big switch. And that's captured in that, kind of that Chapter 16 summary in the matrix. As we pit stop on 16-4 and the risk categorization, we hit an element that required some additional kind of public outreach. You'll see there that it's 2 rows within that item 16-4. And this had to do with, one, we had an existing Oregon amendment kind of removing that redundant public list under the public assembly. We had confirmed that with ICC senior staff last iteration. But really what we're looking at is this, I2, I3, except for I3 condition 1, and then water treatment facilities, public utility water treatment facilities included in that kind of shift from RC3 to RC4. And there was a lot of discussion about this, including about the equipment. You'll see that note there is quite thorough regarding the potential cost increase. We did have a lot of public engagement on this one. We did some proactive outreach through our policy shop. So Todd Smith, the manager there, kind of coordinating that public outreach to those folks to see if they were, one, aware of it, and then 2, engaged on it, and then if they had any opinion or input testimony to provide. So we did have an individual testify at the provide support at the committee meeting, and the general, in a sense, that I got was, from that professional, Mr. Linder, was support. It was general support of this to align with the National Model Code. It doesn't make sense. It would be quite arbitrary to not do that. You'd have to have very linear kind of parameters on not doing that if it was to kind of be a partial alignment, but maybe not a full alignment. And so, but then there was some discussion about like, well, what do we do in rural areas? So for these, specifically for these public utility water treatment facilities, again, they're not built all that often. You're, we're not talking about tons of these being, built all over Oregon every year. But definitely something that there's going to be a fiscal impact versus, the 22 OSSC. The same thing on the prison side. So I believe we did some proactive outreach to DOC, and I don't believe that we received any testimony specifically from DOC. But again, as we talked about, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, there's other opportunities to provide testimony. This isn't like today is not like the deadline. You still have a public hearing coming up, and so if any folks want to be engaged further and want to provide some input, we did get some input from OSPAC, which was supportive of obviously aligning with the National Model Code. And so if folks are listening to this call or they watch this later and they want to engage further, we'd welcome them to do that. As we move through chapter 16, a couple of things here. There's a lot of there are kind of a lot of coordinating, especially on the wind side. So if you pit stop on 1616, you see the Oregon specific table showing the basic design wind speed for each county. We had an SEAO proposal over the top of it to only include special wind regions and to kind of align that. So Jeremy's leading that. That was approved by the committee approving that SEAO proposal because it's so kind of a new approach on what it looks like from an illustration standpoint, tabular standpoint in the code, chapter 16. And so that'll be coordinated. I think we're still going to have the figure there for illustrative purposes because I think it would be strange to not have the state figure in chapter 16 for wind. And Jeremy's leading the charge on making sure that meets what the committee approved and recommended, and as well as the SEAO's expectations of that proposal. Moving through, there's a lot of stuff in chapter 16. 16-29 is a good one. 1613.7. So you see here modification to ASCE 7. We had some existing Oregon amendments that had all sorts of modifications to ASCE 7.16, and they basically were rescinded based on updates to ASCE 7.22. So we love that, right? So we get rid of a bunch of Oregon amendments where we're aligning with the new national model standard. And I believe that was all based on SEAO recommendations as well, which is great. It's always great to have them engaged, aware of, even this, where they just have a sentence that says, hey, we support rescinding all of these Oregon amendments because we're good with what's in the new the ASCE design standard. So it's a good one to pit stop on there. We're going to jump to chapter 17. Let's see here. 170526 metal building systems. There was quite a robust discussion on this one. And so what happened here is you had S 14122 from the IDC, new special inspection requirements specific to pre-engineered metal buildings. And so there was a potential cost increase for this. This is something where, for these type of structures that you're already going to have special inspectors out on site. It's not like it's requiring special inspection where there was none to begin with, but they're already going to be out there. But Adderley engaged out east with obviously a very.
There's two buildings right next to each other that are kind of really dark.
Nope, you're okay. Go ahead, Don.
Okay. Yeah, so she brought a real interesting perspective, from as she always does. But from out there, that had to do with travel time for the special inspectors. Obviously, they're not located right there in Dale, and so they have to, they have to do a bit of traveling. And so there was some fiscal discussions about that. There were some other, perspectives shared, and ultimately, there was basically approving the IBC language is modified, which deleted the majority of, I believe, all of the new special inspection requirements, and just basically left pointers back to the special inspection requirements that already existed. Then you also see we had a kind of a robust discussion, supposed pit stop on 17.9, 1705, 13.5 about architectural components. There was, quite a bit of discussion about these periodic special inspections under public proposal from SEAO, and how that adds cost, and then what there were some perspectives from certain committee members about that, adding cost where maybe it's not necessary, and so those were kind of the rare instances before the SEAO proposal was disapproved. Just noting that there was kind of robust discussion about it. It wasn't kind of, it wasn't a quick react like disapprove that public proposal. But some discussion and obviously roll call votes for those on the recommendations. We'll keep moving along. I think let's pit stop in 18 real quick. So right up front, 18.1, 18.2, 18.3, and 18.4. For those keeping score at home, those are all of our provisions that align with statute, right? So ORS 45, 447, which was heavily modified in recent sessions when we added all of the tsunami considerations into statute. 446 and 447 were modified quite a bit. But what you'll see there is that these existing organ amendments have been updated to align with ASCE 722. So again, it's part of the great work that Jeremy, our program engineer, does, is make sure that those things get updated and that they don't remain kind of outdated references, to maybe Dugami rules in certain instances, or the expectations of statute. So trying to make them coordinate the best we can with, national model standards that are referenced through the base model code selected by this board, as well as, keeping that alignment with statute. We'll keep going on through there. So there was a 18. Let's look at 1811 and 1812. So one of the things that we did here, which is a great catch by Eric, our assistant chief, is basically adjusting the language as we did in Appendix F of the 23 iteration of the OSSC, to really address that soil gas collector option, and make it consistent across for subslab depressurization systems. So those that you would have, in a passive system for the limited occupancies, right? So we're only talking R2 and R3, and then we're only talking those portions of the living spaces above that are in contact with the earth. So a lot of discussion about like stairwells, that's not part of the living space, if it was a common stairwell, or we've had a lot of discussion about having parking kind of first floor and then, the application there. But so look at that language there. We updated the figures accordingly. It's much clearer in that language that ties into the SSEDs in 1812 there. And so just some great cleanup internally, maybe a slight cost increase. I don't even know if that's appropriate, really, to be honest. I think it's just maybe the difference between a T and then actually running some perf pipe instead of not. So you're talking very negligible as far as fiscal impact on that. We'll keep things moving. I'm going to jump over chapter 19. Remember when 19 used to include ACI 318? And now it's like 4 pages. Okay, so we're going to jump 19. We're going to jump Well, one thing we'll pit stop on 21. I guess I could have pit stopped on 19 as well, but you have the new TMS 402 references. You have the mortar for adhered masonry veneer language there that you see in 21-3, 210324. So the committee approved the model there. Great work. We also have that Article 3.2F clean out. So we have that long-standing amendment where we have that increase the 5.33 foot lift height. And so originally this was from Tom Young with Masonry Association, and we're retaining that existing organ amendment. Just want to note that. We're going to skip chapter 12. A lot of no fiscal cleanup for references. Their AISC references, just again aligning with the model throughout that chapter 22. Same with chapter 23. You know what you see there. I think my favorite piece in there is 23-3, 230321, and the alternate fire testing that we see from National Model 20122. So again, just aligning with national model throughout there with no fiscal noted. Let's see here. Oh, pit stopping right real quick in chapter 25, 25-2, 25.10.6 for those keeping score at home. You have a note of a cost increase here, but look at the limited application. So we're talking about for stucco assemblies containing non-wood material. So very limited role or limited application there. Excuse me, we'll keep going. Chapter 27. We're going to pit stop there real quick. 27-1, which impacts 2703.12 and 2.1. And that's, again, those LPS. So that just ties into that prior discussion about the authority piece. So pointers over to EE Board NFPA 70 or the electrical code there. Gonna keep on rolling. Chapter 29. Some really good stuff in chapter 29. One thing that Jody took on, which was just fantastic, was the urinal substitution language that we've had for a long time there in table 29.2.1. So matrix item 29-2 for those keeping score at home. Some really good cleanup there, changing the application a bit, but making it make sense. So great stuff there. Also on the old separate facilities language that we've had in place for a long time, where it's really not about separate facilities. It's more about saying, okay, well, this is where one single user, toilet room is permissible in these instances. We split that out, retitled it, so it's very much more clear. And then the model language that was kept, it keeps this linear allowance for you to have kind of a combined bathroom facilities for all users and not separate them for sexes. And so there's just kind of this flexibility there, even more so than what we've had previously, where it just relied on kind of, building official approval. Now it's this outright allowance. It even talks about banking labs and, providing all fixtures within compartments, where there's you're not allowed to have like urinals out in the open. Everything's got to be within its own compartment, and then banking labs, and that addresses, the privacy, security concerns. And again, that's national model code language. That's how they've addressed it through the model code. So some really good stuff just throughout there. I think, a lot of good stuff in chapter 29, a lot of flexibility, being reasonable when we're talking about non-life safety things, like toilet fixture keys. Okay, we're going to keep going. Chapter 30. So actually, I'm going to jump chapter 30. There wasn't really anything there. Was going to stop on hoistway door protection, but we just remember in chapter 30 we do a lot of cross-referencing back to ASME 17.1, which is the elevator code. And so we do that consistently throughout. And then you'll see some references are retained again in chapter 34, convenience. But that falls under Chief Hartung's authority. And we always check in with him when we have questions about anything that's kind of bordering that chapter 30. So on to 31, we're going to pit stop at 31-2. Some really good stuff on temporary structures, and I'm going to try to make this as quick as possible. But on temporary structures, we kind of have 3 layers now based on where the model code has went. And so what we have is that we have this long-standing Oregon historic flexibility that is like for addressing, let's say, the weekend fruit stand. So remember that under Chapter 1 in Section 108, regulation of these temporary structures is permissive. It's not mandatory. It's permissive. It says that the building official is permitted to regulate temporary structures and uses, not that the building official shall regulate these. And then back when you get into 3103 from 108, for the temporary structure language, it says basically that code provisions have to be provided for in the design as deemed necessary for general safety and welfare of the occupants. So the way that's always been interpreted historically statewide is that you have an abundance of flexibility when you're looking at the weekend fruit stand. First, the flexibility is, are you going to regulate it or not? That's your choice. It's permissive, it's not mandatory. And then second, it's just as necessary. So what's the life cycle of this building? It's going to be up for a weekend. Okay, well then let's be really reasonable about what we're requiring if we are regulating it. Then now what we have at the model code level is the second layer of what is called POTS. So it's identified there, public occupancy temporary structures. And so what they did is they said, okay, well this is a higher threshold of concern when you meet this definition of a public occupancy temporary structure. And so this isn't the weekend fruit stand. Now this is meeting these thresholds of being used by the public in a temporary sense. And so then there's this new section that deals with them very specifically. It has some, reduced structural design parameters that are there. But it really, what it does is it puts bookends on these pots where it's like, okay, well, this is now we have kind of this narrow scope of like, if you meet that definition, then now you minimally have to look for these things for pots. And then what we also have is kind of the third one, which is the temporary special event structures, which was new a couple of cycles ago, if you recall. And that's really dealing with a series of national failures for things like, like stages and the light setups that go kind of around the stage. These temporary structures that are used for special events that are often erected and deconstructed, city to city as they kind of move around for different events. And that comes from the ISC, and we confirmed with Mr. Amos, and we also kind of engaged on that side of things in the IFC that those hadn't been coordinated yet. So we still kind of have these 3 layers moving forward. SEAO was engaged on this one as well, which we really appreciate. But the key is that we're going to keep those 3 layers because they're very distinct from one another. And for now, we're just going to try to provide very clear, consistent guidance and a code path on which one you're in. If it's the weekend fruit stand, maximum flexibility and reasonableness. If it's hot, you have bookends on what you're doing. And if it's temporary special event structure, a very linear path to what's required there. One of the things that was discussed and noted, and Mr. Chairman, you'll know this, even though I think you're multitasking right now, and I know you're a busy man, but is we talked about tents and membrane structures. And so historically here in Oregon, temporary tents and membrane structures erected for less than 180 days have always been under the Fire Services Authority. Going back at least 30 plus years, it's never been anything different. Now, it's not saying that the building department can't be involved. It's just their level of involvement would be as directed by the fire service, right? So if the fire service said, hey, we're looking at this big temporary tent, and it's a circus tent, and we'd really like to have those super sharp engineers from the building department take a look at this. They can absolutely do that, but that's That's on the fire services determination. So those don't fall under the discretion or under the delegated authority from our division for local building inspection program. And we keep that, again, that's always been up in chapter 1 as a carve out, and that'll remain a carve out moving forward. But that was a point of some discussion during the committee meetings. Okay, moving through. I'm just going to jump to chapter 34. So IEBC integration in chapter 34, a lot of really good work from our team. And this one, a lot of cool stuff from SEAO, particularly with existing structural elements carrying a lateral load and kind of some cleanup when you look at the prescriptive method of IEBC chapter 5, which is 3405. So remember, our integration effort on the OSSC is whatever the subsection is of chapter 34, that's the chapter from the IEBC. So 3411 is chapter 11. And 3401 is chapter 1. And so it works that way, and it's a really clean integration. Lora does just a phenomenal job across the board, but this is another example where she does it. And it's pretty linear, where you can really track that model code, and no longer do you have to cross-reference because we adopted the entire IEBC. Even the pieces we don't amend, they look like amendments, and put that into chapter 34. And so not a lot of earth-shattering changes, on that front. One of the nice things is ASCE 41 is now allowed for use, and kind of the prescriptive chapter 34 path, which is cool. I think SEAO is supportive of that. I know Jeremy is from our team, and I am as well. And so that's a great change. And then that SEAO cleanup, that public proposal was approved. Let's see. And then also, we went through all the appendices. The only new appendix was Appendix P there, so item 16 under appendices. And that is addressing sleeping loss. And as you may know, and you may have heard from me already, we have a sunset on the small home specialty code here in Oregon. And that's the only path that addresses sleeping loss, right? Sleeping loss served by alternating current devices and chip ladders in particular. And so if you look at ORS 45, this is a piece where we have organized our approach moving forward. The small home specialty code is going to sunset in statute, and then what we're going to address is not small homes moving forward. It's just we're going to address sleeping loss, and so we're really going to be looking at this Appendix P. But for now, it's preempted, and it's superseded by the small home specialty code path. We wouldn't want to have some sleeping loss provisions in the OSSC that would confuse things. So, but that's the approach moving forward, and we do have, I believe, a white paper of sorts that's being finalized currently. Andy Bolton from our team has done a phenomenal job on that document. So if you're interested in that, I believe it'll be shared or posted on our webpage in the near future if it hasn't been already. And then finally, statewide alternate methods. So remember, we don't go to the board for interps. That's our authority to create interpretations. We do it all day long, every day, informal interps, but then statewide code interpretations are under our exclusive authority. And then statewide alternate methods are not, right? So we need approval of the board for the technical and scientific facts of statewide alternate methods. And so you'll see item 1 through 5 listed there. And then the plan from our team and staff. We're going to rescind those 2 recent ones that this board approved, scientific and technical facts of 2404 and 2403, dealing with multi-period response spectrum for basically bridging the gap that's ASC 722. So those will be rescinded once the 25 iteration of the OSSC is effective. And with that, Mr. Chairman and the board, appreciate your patience. I've made it through. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Rocco. Appreciate the summary. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Gary's giving you claps. Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate that summary and hard work and putting all that together and going through all that. That's a lot of information, for sure. Okay, so I guess let me open it up for any questions of board members for Chief Rocco on anything. Yeah, I don't have any questions on anything either. Okay, absent any questions at this point in time, we would entertain a motion. This does require a motion. There's a couple of different options that board can look at. But if there is a motion, we'll go ahead and entertain that now. Or any additional discussion on this item.
Chair Schmidt, this is Vice Chair Andy Dykeman. I'll present a motion. I'll present a motion. Yeah, motion. I'll present a motion to approve the proposed code recommendations and forward to the administrator for rulemaking and subsequent adoption, with the findings that the added cost, if any, is necessary to the health and safety of the occupants or the public, or necessary to conserve scarce resources.
Thank you, Vice Chair. So we have a motion to approve. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, Katie, if I could please ask a roll call.
Marshall McGrady,
Aye.
Brenda Hartzog,
Aye.
Gary Heikkinen,
Aye.
Lora Ratcliff,
Aye.
Shayla Duke,
Aye.
Andrew Dykeman, Vice Chair,
Aye.
and Chair Eric Schmidt.
Aye.
The motion was unanimous, sir.
All right, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, board. Again, thank you to the committee that's worked so hard on this the last several months. And again, much appreciation to not only Chief Rocco, but the rest of the Building Codes Division staff in working on this. Monumental effort for sure. So it's nice to see that we're on our way towards another code adoption. So again, thank you very much for that. Let me just check and see. We're at a place here on the agenda to see if board members have any announcements that they would like to make for the good of the order. All right, hearing none. So at this point in time, since there is no further business, the October 9th, 2024 Building Codes Structures Board meeting is now adjourned. The time now is 11:39 a.m. And thank you all very much for being here with us and all of our guests. Have a good rest of the month or so, and we'll see you in November. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.